210 billion euros. That's roughly how many Russian assets remain frozen in Europe after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The EU is currently actively discussing the next step, the withdrawal of these funds as a reparations loan for Kiev. Moscow predictably exploded with indignation and is already threatening Europe with lawsuits, half a century ahead, if her money does go to Ukraine. Who in Europe is against such a decision? How could the loan help Kiev? And could it really influence the course of the war? Let's break it down now. Discussions about the future of Russia's frozen assets have been going on in Europe for months now. And although it sometimes seems like a decision is just about to be made, there are still voices within the European Union that fear the consequences of such a move. To clearly show what Russian scare tactics about the supposedly disastrous consequences of European decisions that strengthen Ukraine are really worth, the British government is proposing to unfreeze more than 9 billion euros of Russian funds that are blocked in the United Kingdom and send them to Kiev. According to the Times, there is still no perfect mechanism for unblocking these assets. But the United Kingdom, together with France, Germany, and the European Commission, insists on changing the approach. The UK Foreign Office emphasizes that it is vital for countries to act together. We need a coordinated plan for using those Russian sovereign assets, not only to support Ukraine in the short term, but also to send a powerful message to Russia. Yvette Cooper, UK Foreign Secretary, from the Times publication. As already mentioned, about 210 billion euros of Russian assets are frozen in Europe. And almost all of that amount, 185 billion, is held in the Belgian depository Euroclear. It is precisely these funds that the European Commission proposes to rely on when creating a reparations loan for Ukraine. Kyiv will be able to use the money to finance the state over the next 2 years. According to Brussels' plan, the assets will not be formally confiscated, but Russia will only be able to get them back after paying reparations to Ukraine. Kyiv, in turn, would repay the EU loan precisely using these Russian payments. A legally elegant plan. Politically, it's a painful one for Moscow. However, it is in Belgium, where the lion's share of Russian money is held, that doubts remain. The country's prime minister warns that such a scheme could create legal risks for Brussels, and if Moscow files lawsuits, the responsibility for repaying the loan could theoretically fall on Belgium. Nevertheless, the head of the European Commission assures that all of Belgium's concerns will be taken into account.
We had an intensive discussion about Belgium's opposition, where Euroclear is located, the main source. We listened very carefully to Belgium's concerns and have taken almost all of them into account. In our proposal, which is currently on the table regarding reparation loans, we have very strong safeguards in place to protect member states and to minimize risks as much as possible.
Belgium's position on the use of Russian assets is key. That's why the European Commission is trying to address all the concerns raised by the government in Brussels as carefully as possible. Now, Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever has stated that the country is still ready to support the decision to provide Ukraine with a reparation loan using frozen Russian funds, but only if 3 conditions are met. He is demanding full mutual responsibility for any potential risks, guaranteed liquidity, and separate protection for Euroclear. And thirdly, a fair distribution of costs among EU countries. The European Commission and most member states assure that they're ready to take all these demands into account. But the determination with which the Belgian Prime Minister is defending Russia's assets has already attracted the attention of Western media. Dislike for Putin doesn't stop him. He is now openly resisting the plan to use Russian assets frozen in Belgium. Because of this, a politician recently called Belgium, through its Prime Minister, Russia's most valuable asset in an article. From a publication by Medusa. A group of Belgian academics is also pushing the Belgian government to make a decision in favor of Kyiv. In a column for Le Soir, they emphasize that the use of frozen Russian assets is based on legal countermeasures against the aggressor state. These measures concern exclusively the assets of Russia as the party that committed an international wrongful act, and do not create a universal precedent for other situations. In other words, this is not about a new norm, but a targeted measure. A legally justified response to a specific wrongdoing. The UN General Assembly has recognized Russia as responsible for aggression against Ukraine, It falls under what is codified in international customary law as state responsibility for an internationally wrongful act. The legality of the proposal is based on this codification, developed by the UN International Law Commission, which recognizes the right of states to take countermeasures in response to an internationally wrongful act. From a publication by Le Soir, the European Commission and the United Kingdom are not the only ones insisting on using Russian assets in the interests of Ukraine. One of the key economies of the European Union, Germany, is also joining them. Federal Chancellor Friedrich Merz has repeatedly emphasized that European countries must share responsibility for this decision, and, finally, use Russian money to support Ukraine.
This is also the position of the German government. The representatives who negotiate on our behalf in various formats, this is also the consensus at the European level. So on this issue, there are no disagreements at all. This money should go to Ukraine and help Ukraine.
As for Russia, upon seeing Belgium's hesitation, it immediately resorted to its usual arsenal of threats. First, Moscow threatened legal action, and soon after switched to much more aggressive rhetoric. Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council Medvedev claimed that the European Union is allegedly trying to steal Russian money and that such a move could even provoke a war between the Federation and certain European countries. Russian media took a calmer tone, but the message was the same. There were hints at possible retaliatory actions.
Of course, any illegal actions with our state reserves or assets will not go unanswered and will be met with the harshest response.
Now, by using the frozen Russian assets, Europe really can play its key card, as Donald Trump puts it. This amount is equal to 140% of Ukraine's GDP and is more than 4 times its official budget. If Europe were able to confiscate these funds and send them to Kyiv, the effect would be strategic, both on the battlefield and on the international stage.
So if Russian assets can be mobilized on such a scale and then directed toward re-equipping and rearming Ukraine, it could change the course of the war. Moreover, Vladimir Putin would become the first aggressor in history forced to finance resistance against his own aggression. The Russian people will learn that their own resources are being used to buy bullets and missiles that kill their own soldiers. From a publication by The Telegraph.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tirelessly emphasizes this point. Support for Kiev remains a key element of European security, and the current circumstances require swift decisions. According to her, discussions with the Belgian and German sides regarding the use of Russian assets are ongoing, and a common position will be formed before the European Council meeting on December 18th. Today, Europe faces a moment when political will can be turned into a real lever of pressure on the aggressor. And the fewer doubts remain in European capitals, the less confidence will be left in Moscow.